So when I got the call, I was like, "Hey, what details do you got for me?" And they were like, "Hey, you're cut." So I was like, it was brutal. It was so brutal, and I was heartbroken. Molly doesn't have a foreskin, but when I told her for the purpose of the exercise, you need to have a foreskin for the clown joke, she was like, "Yeah, I will. I will have a foreskin for the clown joke."
Hello, everyone, and welcome back for some more freshly brewed drag tea. Today, I have with me an amazingly talented queen who combined fashion and comedy when she won our hearts and made it to the final three on Drag Race Down Under Season 2. I'm super excited for you all to get to know her better and learn more about her amazing journey in drag. We'll, of course, be talking all things Drag Race, and I'll be asking some of the amazing questions you all sent in. So, please join me in welcoming the incredible Hannah Conda!
Hi, everyone. Hi, beautiful. How's it going?
Good, thank you. Look beautiful yourself.
Thank you. She scrubs up okay.
She certainly does. Oh, you're looking lovely. And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Honestly, I appreciate it so much. Anything to, get everyone to watch Down Under Season 2.
Yeah, it was a great season. I really enjoyed it. And, obviously we're very excited to hear all about, we'll be talking about Drag Race and everything as well, and hearing some of your experiences and maybe some, backstage tea or something. And
yeah, I can spill some tea. I can spill that. I don't mind.
Well, that's why you're here.
Well, let's do it. Do you have? Do you? Oh, I was going to ask. Do your fans and your viewers have like a name? Do you call them like tea timers? I don't know. Like how they have names.
Not officially, but someone did say tea bags in the comments.
Oh, I love
once.
it. Oh, the tea bags. Yeah, I like the tea bags. That's cute.
Well, the teabaggers, I think it was, which I thought sounded a bit weird, but
I love just tea bags. That's really cute. All right, tea bags. Let's brew something.
I like that. I'll go with that. Okay, so for all the tea bags out there watching, so I was wondering if you could tell the tea bags a little bit about, a bit about Hannah Conda, like sort of where are you from, how did you get into drag, and things like that.
Yeah, so I am been doing drag for about 13 years now. I started drag in Perth, which is a city in Western Australia. It's actually the most isolated city in the world, and that's where I grew up. And I started going out to like gay clubs and stuff. And I when I turned 18, and I made friends with a drag queen, Ruby Jules, and and she just started. So I was helping her with her bags, and like, she's like, you know what, you need to give drag a go, like, give it go one night. And I was like, okay, one night only. And I did it. And it was an amateur competition where the prize was a $50 bar card. And I won. I'm just going to put that out there. I won, but it was overturned and overruled by the host at the time because she said that I needed to do two shows. And I was like, what? Sorry, what? What's this two-show business? And then she's like, yeah, there's an earlier show and a later show. To win, you have to compete in both. And I was like, that has never been a rule. I have known so many gay boys that have just gotten to drag, come to the last show and won so they could have a night, like a boozy night on the venue. And anyway, she overturned it, and I was furious. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back next week, and I'm going to show this, and I'm going to do two shows, and I'm going to win. And I did, and I loved it. And then it kind of just bred this like habit in me of just like loving drag, and I just had the best time. And it 13 years later, it kind of got out of hand from that one night only experience that it was meant to be. But yeah, so then about 7 years ago, I decided to leave Perth, and I just felt like I'd sort of done everything I wanted to do in Perth, and I needed to have a sea change. And I took myself over to Sydney, and I've been here ever since. And yeah, I've made myself a nice little home here, and yeah, I love it.
Wow, that's a cool story. Like what a scandal about it being overturned. I mean, that sounds like, hashtag justice for Hannah. I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah, it was before hashtags or any of that too. So it was kind of, but you know what? It would have been a hashtag justice for Hannah situation. But yeah, I was furious. I was like, I want my $50 bar card. I'm an 18-year-old who's like working, casually at a sunglass hut. Like, I want my $50. Like, I want to get drunk. But anyway, I showed her. I took her job later on, so it's fine.
Oh, it all comes around. It all comes around in the end.
It really does. It really does. You never know, you know. You never know who's coming up behind you.
Well, that's such a cool story, and yeah, because I was really interested because I didn't actually realize that you were from Perth until you did the branding challenge on Drag Race, and you were talking about it. Because obviously Perth is, like you said, it's the most remote city in the world. It's miles away from everywhere else in Australia. It's literally on its own, basically. It's actually
Yeah.
closer to Asia than it is to another city in Australia, I believe.
Yeah, you can get to Bali
Um,
in a 3 hour flight, babes. And that's why Bali is full of Australians just having holidays.
Yeah, and I didn't realize any of that until I sort of started researching Australia a bit more on the geography and everything. So it kind of made me think, what's the drag scene like, or even just the gay scene, or the LGBT scene in Perth, if it's such a sort of remote, isolated place?
Yeah, so it's still quite a thriving queer community. I think, you know, Perth breeds really great talent, if I do say so myself, because you know you've got nothing else to do but hone your craft. So it's got a beautiful, eclectic queer community, and the drag is fabulous. It's honestly world class. I was just actually there. We're currently on tour at the moment, and we were there, and I got to take some of the girls from the show out to Connections because there's two gay venues. There's the Court and Connections, and they're the gay venues. There are a few others that have sort of gay nights and stuff, but they're the main two. And we went out to Connections and we saw the show. And Fo actually turned to me and she's like, "Oh, you make so much more sense now." And I was like, "Why?" And she's like, "Because these bitches are so good. Like, there's no messing up. You can't be late. You can't do this because you're. It's like very, you know, professional. You know, everyone works really hard, but it's so, also very multifaceted. There's like not just one lane of drag there. There's a lot of alternative drag. There's a lot of, you know, trans women and trans men that do drag in all of its different forms. And it's sort of never been something that has been questioned. I found it really interesting moving to Sydney and the idea of women doing drag. And I was like, people were upset about it. And I was like, well, this has been happening in Perth for years. Like, that's like half of my drag family were women, and I was like, I just didn't get it. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, it's just very interesting that you know, we just had this eclectic sort of brew of people coming into drag and loving it and doing it really really well. And I'm really proud of Perth. Like, it's come a long way, and you know, I think in the first season we kind of had a spotlight on Perth, you know, probably in a negative way, and you know, to sort of, you know, show that, you know, that and they took action straight away in all these things to make sure that those incidents never happen again, and make sure that all the venues are safe and inclusive for everybody. And yeah, I'm really proud of it. They've done a lot of work, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful scene over there.
Well, that's nice. It's nice that it's funny to hear there's such a difference between that and Sydney. And you would think that maybe Sydney would be, because it's a bigger city and it's sort of the first city of Australia. It's not the capital, but it's sort of the first city, that they would be a bit more kind of inclusive or forward thinking. But it sounded almost like Perth was actually more that way.
Yeah, yeah, it was interesting to me. It's Sydney's now definitely made strides as well. Like, but I'm talking when I sort of first moved over. But yeah, they've definitely made a lot of strides in the right direction as well. But yeah, it was definitely one of those things that I just noticed when I moved here. I was like, oh, this is weird that people question that, you know?
No, it is very, yeah. I think the whole idea of what is drag and everything, that's developed so much over time, especially as shows like Drag Race have made it more mainstream. People have started to question it a bit more and things. So
Yeah,
interesting to hear there's some differences, but obviously nice that it's all inclusive, because that's what we want.
yeah,
Um,
100%.
and so And so, speaking of obviously Drag Race and things, obviously, you know, a lot of people will know you obviously because of season 2 of Drag Race Down Under. So I sort of wanted to hear a bit about what was your experience like auditioning for it, what made you decide to do it, and did you audition for season 1? Because I know a lot of people said that they expected you to, because you're so well known and sort of so like polished and people know you for that, so they expected you to be on.
Yeah, I was asked to do season one, and I did the infamous Zoom call now as it is. So yeah, they slid into my DMs and like, hey, you want to do a show? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I auditioned and I got pretty far, to be honest. At one point, I was kind of told a few sort of things that I needed to sort of start preparing for season one, and so and at that point we didn't know what the show was. We had no idea. They kept that all under wraps because drag queens and queers have very big mouths, and it was being produced by Warner Brothers. So we all did this like deep dive and we're like, oh, well, they make this show called House of Drag, so maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's what we're going for. But then when they started to like suggest some of the things that we needed to sort of prepare for, we were like, oh, it's got to be Drag Race. It has to be. So, yeah, I started to prepare for things, and then I got a call one day, and they were saying, oh, we're going to send over some details for the visa that you need to apply for. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. So when I got the call, I was like, hey, what details do you got for me? And they were like, hey, you're cut. So I was like, it was brutal. It was so brutal. And I was heartbroken because it was something I've always wanted to do. And I kind of gave myself this period of time of like, I gave myself about 3 weeks of mourning the situation where I would be like, you know what? This is no reflection on you. This is no reflection on your drag. You just weren't meant to be in that cast. And it hurt the ego a little bit, to be fair. But I had to just kind of move on and like let it go because what can I do? Like, you were done. So, yeah, so they cut me from that. And then when it got time when they announced the auditions for the second season, I wasn't going to audition. I wasn't in like the greatest sort of headspace. We were in a lockdown and I just wasn't feeling like this is something I wanted to do. And it was actually my partner, Jack. He said to me, he's like, well, you know what? Like, and to be honest, I also didn't really want to do drag anymore. If I'm completely honest, I really kind of had just sort of had enough. And Jack saw me and I was miserable. I was just really in this terrible depression. And he's like, you know what? Maybe doing the audition tape will sort of bring some love of drag back for you. You've got nothing else to do. We're literally sitting here 24/7 in this house. You may as well just have fun and see if you like it. Because it's quite an arduous task, the audition tape. It's like a 25-minute, production, and you've got to showcase all these different skills and everything. And I was like, you know what? Okay, let's do it, Jack. So he was my director of cinematography, and on the iPhone. So he started filming stuff, and I actually did start loving it again, and I was having a really, really good time. So by the time I got to the end process and I'd sort of edited it all together and put it together, I was like really proud of it. And I was like, what have I got to do? What have I got to lose? I can sit on it, but it's really good. I should maybe just send it through and see what happens. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And I sent it through, and yeah, it was maybe a week or two later. Maybe a little bit longer. No, it was probably like 3 weeks. And they go, oh, hey, we would love you to have you on the cast. And I was like, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Because, are you sure? And then they said, yeah, we're really sure. Let's do it. And I just jumped at it. I was, it was meant to be. The universe said, this is what you're meant to be doing. So I went with it.
Wow. So what I'm hearing really is that Jack is the unsung hero of all of this then.
Pretty much, yeah, he is. If I was Rose and he was Jack in the Titanic, I would definitely have to make room on the door frame at the end of the movie.
Thing.
Yeah. But yeah, he really did. He was my champion at that point to push me through it. So I'm very grateful.
That's really sweet. And obviously, we are so glad that you did, because obviously we loved you on the show. And obviously, like you said, it was obviously meant to be that you were on that season. But interesting to hear about the fact that you were sort of they were interested in season one for you, but then effectively cancelled you kind of thing and then brought you in for season two. But, Who knows? Maybe we're glad that you were on either season. So, but for season two, obviously you get on, you get all of the outfit. They tell you what outfits you need to bring and things like that. You get there day one and you walk through the door. What are your first thoughts?
I was like, they put me first. Ah! And then because I was so nervous, I was like, we'd just done 10 days quarantine. I hadn't seen anybody. And then, like, when we got to the actual hotel before filming, we had like a day or two to do like last minute things. And I could hear one particular scream in the hallway. And I think you can all assume that it was Fofo. And if you're assuming Fofo, you are correct. I heard her and I was like, oh, that little, she's here. Okay. So I kind of was like, getting ready that morning, and I was really, really in my feelings. I was so nervous. I was like, have I just strapped a time bomb to myself? What am I doing? It's like, all those things, because it's just a giant leap of faith to dive into a reality TV show situation. And when I got to the set and they were like, okay, you ready? You just do your best reactions. And I was like, okay. So they put me through and I walked in and I'm the first. And I just lost all sense of being able to speak. And I think I even said, wow, this looked real big here. Wow. And I was like, oh, real bad English, everyone. Sorry. Thank God they cut that bit out. But yeah, I was so surreal walking in because, like, on the TV, it doesn't look too big, but when you get there, it's so overwhelmingly huge because you feel, I think, the pressure of what's about to happen in that room, and the room sort of takes this sort of form of being, the place where all of this is going to unfold. So it feels really daunting. But when I walked in, I was the first. I just like saw it, and it was like, oh my God, it's real. This is real. It's happening. And yeah, I was just really overwhelmed, to be honest. Excited, but overwhelmed.
I can imagine it must be a really overwhelming experience, and I can only imagine that's just a crazy feeling. And obviously, you talked about you heard Fofa's scream, so obviously, I guess you knew she was going to be on. When everyone else eventually came in, how many of the cast did you know?
I knew of everyone apart from Yuri. She was fresh for me. I'd heard of Yuri, but I'd never like seen her. And Spanky, I actually watched in House of Drag while I was in quarantine, waiting for the waiting to be let out of our quarantine jail. So I watched her just before I went in. And Jack's like, I reckon she's going to be there, and I was like, maybe. You never know. And turns out she was. But yeah, I knew of pretty much everyone and have worked with most of the cast as well. So that was an interesting sort of dynamic, and that's what drag is like, in Australia and in New Zealand, is that we kind of all know each other from social media, and we know about each other, or we've gone somewhere and we've crossed paths at a festival or a gig or something. So we kind of know everybody. So that's just a very different dynamic to what it's like in the States and the UK, where it's a little bit bigger and there's more, sort of more entertainers that you kind of have sort of relationships with people that are formed before you go in.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Like from what I've heard, I've interviewed other people from down under, and they've said that they kind of knew a lot of the people because the drag scene is not quite as big, especially if you're from one of the bigger cities. It's kind of sort of who's going to be on because of their level of drag or how well known they are and things like that. So,
Yeah. And one drag queen
when
going
you saw
missing, you'd like, it's a telltale sign.
yeah, when you start following some of them on social media, you notice they've gone on like vacation for a few months. You're like, okay, well. um, when you saw the full lineup of the queens, which one contestant would you say did you could have think instantly like that person's my biggest competition?
Queen. No, like, hands down, she like is sensational. I have been a huge Kween Kong fan for a very, very long time, and to see her walk in, I was like thrilled, but freaking like petrified. Like this, God. Okay.
Yeah, her reputation precedes her, and she was
Yeah,
amazing on the show, like amazing performer. So I can, yeah, I when she walked in, you could just tell everyone was so gagged. I was like, okay, yeah, she's
yeah,
obviously going to be one to watch out for.
yeah, yeah. She's
And
just
then
a sensational person.
so the first challenge you did was that the photo shoot with the sizzling sausage or whatever. Um, what was that like? Sort of that moment of, because I guess that's probably one of your first interactions with RuPaul on the show. What was that moment like? Filming that, meeting RuPaul, and sort of having some interaction with him.
Yeah, I was really again, I was just starstruck, to be honest. I'd met her once before at a drag con in LA when I was with Minnie and Vanity. And she came past when she was out of drag and we said hello and stuff. And she was really nice. But then to see her in this setting was like petrifying. I was like, oh, there she is. She's the boss. Okay, we got to impress her. And it was just my goal to make her laugh. And I did. Like, we had a really great time in the shoot. Um, I think for me, the first sort of 2 to 3 episodes, I was just really not fully present. I was really nervous and just really anxious about everything. And I don't think I fully sort of came into myself until maybe like Snatch Game and that episode. But like to see her first come in and we have to be this one-on-one thing, and I've got a sausage in my hand and a piece of bread, and apparently she doesn't like things going in your mouth. So they were like, don't put anything in your mouth. Just don't put anything in your mouth. And I was like, okay, but then when you get it there, you're urged to just put it in your mouth. I was like, I just wanted to, but I tried my best. And yeah, I had a great time with her. We were having a good old giggle and I was making her laugh. But when we finished, Minnie was after me and I could hear the screaming laughter of Rue. And I was like, oh, this she's won the first challenge. Absolutely, hands down. So, but yeah, it was wild.
Yeah, yeah. When I watched everyone seemed to be having a lot of fun, and I do remember thinking, because RuPaul has been quite vocal, he does not like seeing people eat in or out of drag. So I was a bit sort of, I was like, oh, that's a very unusual challenge. But yeah, Minnie, obviously, I think she won that challenge, and it was very obvious because she was just like in stitches. But Ru also was like laughing at you, and you were talking about like, oh no, I can't have that sauce. You know, it was so funny, and
Oh yeah, then
I
I
guess
said
that's probably the main.
I've got IBS. Oh, I said I've got IBS to Paul RuPaul, and he's like, "What's IBS?" And I was like, "I'm literally on the verge of shitting myself at any given moment." Ru?
Too much for you?
Yes, I've got IBS and I need to be conservative.
IBS?
Irritable bowel syndrome. I could shit myself at any given moment, so look out. But yeah, I was like, oh, no, not the best introduction I could have gone with.
It made you memorable though, because I remember the IBS line. I remember like absolutely wetting myself laughing, and like it was so funny. And I was like, okay, I know I can already guess who Hannah Conda is and what this queen is going to be like just from that one interaction.
She's gonna shit herself. That's what she's gonna do.
And then, so you then obviously week one was the sewing challenge or the design challenge. How did you feel about that when you saw the materials that you had to work with, and it was all basically a bunch of junk, effectively?
I saw it all come in and I was like, you fucking bastard. Honestly, excuse my French, I do have a potty mouth. Yeah, when they brought all the leaves and things and bits and pieces, like, I was just looking around at it. I was like, I just need to dive in and see what I grab. And again, trust the universe, trust the process. And whatever I pull out, I will have to make do with. And I dived in and I came out with 2 pieces of like, I don't know, like 50 centimeter brown crepe fabric. And a whole bunch of sticks and leaves and a piece of plastic. So I was like, well, this is what we've got. I went back to the pile after it had been ransacked, and there was just like tires and random shrubbery and straws, a lot of straws. And I've seen people try to do straw things before, and it never goes well. With what I had, I felt like I'd set myself up for a real challenge. And I was like, well, I'm going to have to be the girl that hot glues guns to a corset, because I don't know if anyone has ever sewed a leaf. It doesn't really go too well. I did try and sew the fabrics together to make a bigger piece of fabric as something, but because I'm short, but I'm curvy, it just didn't wrap around my body properly. So I was like, okay, well, we've got to make do. And I had a corset that you always pack a corset. You never know when you might need it. And thank God I did, because that became the basis of my Kate Moss look. And so I started forming like the leaves on the bodice, and then I like found a belt situation to drape the crepe fabric around. And then I was like, what have I done? This looks awful. And from what I could see, I was like, if I stood back, I could see sort of a nymphy fairy thing. And I was like, well, this is my brand. Let's lean into that. So I stole some leaves from Kween and the big flack leaves, and I started gluing them to this like wing cutout that I made. And then that's what sort of formed the wings, and yeah, it became like a little Tinkerbell moment. I think that's called trusting the process. And I'm glad I did, because it always, like, I was really happy with it, how it turned out. And yes, it was glued to a corset, but when you have to work with, you just kind of create and make the best out of the situation.
Yeah, I really liked your outfit. I thought it would look really fun. It was very sort of pixie fairy, that kind of vibe. I really liked it. And I actually was thinking you were high that week, but high in the rankings, I mean.
Yeah.
I was sort of thinking maybe she'll be in the top, because I thought it looked really clean, and even though it was stuff glued to a corset, I don't think they really picked up on that. It kind of looked good enough that you didn't quite see that, so I think it just looked good.
Yeah, I was chuffed. I was really happy with how it turned out. And again, I think I watched Minnie's video with you the other week, and she said as long as there was like one person that was like worse than you, I was fine. That's kind of was my mentality for a while, to be fair. As long as one is worse, or it's two. As long as two are worse, we'll be fine. But the way... So when I looked around and I saw some of them, I was like, I'm fine. I'll be okay.
Definitely. No, I really liked your outfit. And yeah, some people struggled more than others, but it was still, if you get given rubbish to work with, that's what's going to come out.
Rubbish. And then my leaves, they started to like, I think I even said it, I was like, my leaves did what leaves do, and they started to like brown and like fold in on themselves. And I was like, well, when I got there the next morning, before the runway, some of them had like fallen off, so I was like trying to find other fresh looking leaves to shove back on. And then someone actually commented, because I said this, I can't remember where I said it, they're like, oh, you should have just sprayed it with water. And I was like, where the were you when we were doing that? Because I didn't know that was a thing. But anyway, that advice now lives on in my soul. So if I ever make something out of leaves now, I will spray it with water. So that's advice for our tea bags out there.
Tea bags and gardening advice and things like that. Yeah, great. Yeah, so you were safe that week, and I think that week was it was a pretty safe bet that you were going to be safe because your outfit was really good. So obviously happy that you weren't the first out or anything. You then go into the second week, which was the acting challenge, and you were partnered with Minnie in the prison thing, and you were the two people on the toilet drinking the homemade wine or whatever, and it was really good. What was that like? Did you have some acting experience, and were you confident in that?
Yeah, I feel with drag, you become a jack off of all trades. You kind of have to be, you always get lumped into certain situations, and you just kind of have to fumble your way through. And I've done that a lot in my career, and I just knew that this was something I'd be fine at. And working with Minnie was easy as because we'd worked together a lot here in Sydney. So when we were paired together, I was thrilled because I knew that we had the chemistry to pull it off and to make something really insane, which we did. And Michelle and Reese said that we were like out of a John Waters movie, and that was the biggest compliment for us. We were like, yes, we are. But I had the greatest time working with Coops. We always have a good time. She's just a laugh riot. and she's just and we get each other's sense of humor and the way that we like to work. And with Minnie, with her dyslexia, it was for us, it was kind of about talking the lines out, and and actually physically putting actions to the words and to the lines. And I think that's what kind of put us in good stead, because we've created something that we went out. And to be honest, we probably created a little bit too much, because they were like, this isn't the theatre in the round. We were giving all angles and we were doing it all. But they were like, we're on film, so keep it there. And we're like, okay, yeah, sure. But yeah, we had the best time. Oh, it was so much fun. Honestly, on that day, I was such a naughty girl. Looking like that, I loved it. I love looking like an absolute basket case. I am unafraid to look ugly. So looking like that and sitting in the waiting rooms as we're doing all the other filming and stuff like that, I was getting everyone laughing. That was my job on set. I was chief of laughing, and I got Spanky laughing so much that we nearly pissed our pants, but we had to get put into 2 different rooms because we just wouldn't stop laughing. I was like, we're not even talking, we're just laughing. So anyway, when the person that told us to get into the other rooms left, I come back out and I'm like, start the whole thing again. Oh, it was so much fun. That was actually such a fun day.
So basically, you were like 2 naughty schoolgirls.
Yes, that was me the whole time, to be fair. I like to have I just love making everyone laugh.
Yeah, you definitely did. And I thought you and Minnie worked so well together. It was obvious that you had this sort of natural chemistry, and your roles were so funny. And I really was not surprised that you did really well that week. And then when I watched the final product, I really thought that you two were so high. I was like, they're probably going to win, or they're going to be at least up there, because you two were seamless.
That was my first taste of being robbed, I feel. And I'm just going to say it, because I looked so good on that runway as well. Having the moth be the runway for that week, and then how good the challenge was. I was really proud of Spanky, and Spanky did such a great job too. And to be honest, I didn't feel robbed at the time. I was really proud of Spanx, and I still am. But it was in the editing and watching it back, I was like, I should have. I think it should have been a double win between me and Minnie, if I'm honest.
I think if you take runway into account, because your runways were just always so polished, so good. So I was thinking maybe that would tip you over to being in the top and win. But yeah, Spanky was also great. She's just not natural charisma, to the hills. And but yeah, runways maybe weren't quite as polished, whereas yours were always super polished. That was kind of your thing. You always brought it on the runway.
I do what I can, babes. I do what I can.
And so obviously that week was done, and then you go on to the next week. So you were safe and everything. You were high again. So obviously you were sort of building momentum, and then you go into the next week, which was when you had to do a drag brunch, kind of like a stand up in a way.
Yeah. And
you were partnered with Molly Poppins,
little Molly,
your Hobbit sister.
Yeah.
What was that like working with her?
That was so much fun. I'd known Molly for a while. We'd crossed paths. Molly used to come to the show that we used to do here in Sydney with myself and Charisma Bell and Carmen Get It, who I hope to see on future seasons. They're amazing. But Molly used to come to see our shows. And so I'd always sort of, cross paths with her, but we'd never actually worked together. And when we got sort of paired together, I was really excited. I was, keen to see, how our chemistry would mesh and the things that we could create. And I was actually really proud of how it all came out. I think she's got such a sort of a weird sense of humor like me that it just kind of all worked out really well. And, Molly doesn't have a foreskin, but when I told her for the purpose of the exercise, you need to have a foreskin for the clown joke, she was like, yeah, I will have a foreskin for the clown joke. Because I had said that was a joke that I had said, it was one of the things that I like to say that I think it's really funny. I think foreskin balloon farts are very funny, especially when you're in drag, because you tuck so hard that, when you fart into your foreskin, it goes, and it blows up. So I said, Molly, you need to use this. Like, it needs to be the thing. And I'm so glad she did say it because it was so funny. But we had when we were filming our brunch section, we were on a roll and we're having fun, and it was still really good. But when we kind of got to the middle section, a plane flew over, and we had to pause production for the plane because it was really loud. So we lost like a little bit of the material because I had a freak out and got flustered about where we were, and I started saying all of Molly's things, and then Molly's like, "You're saying my lines," and I was like, "I'm sorry, just keep going, we'll get there, just let it go." Because when you go to a drag brunch, it's all about off the cuff. It's all about interacting with the audience and interacting with the people. This structured, scripted thing was all very confusing. And I think one of the critiques we had was that we didn't have enough things about brunch and about food. But then when we did our sort of, the little catch up with Reese and Chris, they said, "Oh, everyone else is doing food stuff. Just don't do food stuff." So we're like, okay, great. We won't do food stuff. They want to know more about us. We'll tell them stories about us. So we did that. And then they go, "Oh, well, where's the food stuff?" It's like, well, what do you want?
Well, they were trying to set you up. They were sabotaging.
Oh, sabotage. It's fun, but I was really proud of it. And we got, I got my little Hobbit sister out of it. So, yeah, I was really proud of that.
It was really fun. I really enjoyed you two, and it was like the whole like Hobbit thing, and like you were making sure, obviously I was like, this is a great pairing. Like it was just a match made in heaven in that sense.
Yeah, I felt that. And it was it was nice that we were short-statured ladies, and we could play up that Hobbit thing. We did have one good joke because Minnie at the time, she kind of was always talking, and like when Rue would come in, she'd talk over him and stuff, and she's like, he was like, "Is that Minnie talking again?" And so we played into the Hobbit thing, and then we said, "Oh, there's old man Gandalf over there," and then Molly turns and goes, "You shall not talk." But the plane came across, and I forgot to set Molly up, so we didn't get that joke out, but it was funny.
So the plane sabotaged you as well.
Oh, yes, Matt, thank you for seeing that. I've been set up this whole time.
Robbed.
Right.
So I mean, you and Molly did a great job that week. It was so funny, and I really, you were doing the Hobbit jokes and everything. I thought that was really funny. One of the moments that was quite poignant from that episode was before the actual challenge. Was you were talking with particularly Kween Kong, among others, about obviously sort of like race, cultural appropriation. That's obviously when you were sort of talking about what you were involved with, and obviously that was a very sort of poignant moment. So I was wondering if you could sort of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, for myself, going into the show, I knew that my casting could be contentious to some. I've been very open about, my past with cultural appropriation, and I've spoken about it quite a lot on social media as well. So it was something I knew going into the show was going to be spotlighted, and people were either going to like me or they weren't going to like me, or they were indecisive, and you know what I mean? Like, it was one of those things. I just knew it was going to be a part of my sort of journey on the show. But it was also important. It was also important for both Kong and I, for each of us, to showcase how you can have conversations about race and racism without having, that really sort of uncomfortableness that comes along with it. We kind of needed to normalize it, and Kong's so like amazing at at leading those conversations, and including people in on the conversations, and sort of hitting those really important messages that we want to be getting out about it. Because if I think in the isolating of people in these, when we're having these conversations and sort of turning our backs on people, doesn't really sort of help the process of healing and growing as a community. And while drag down under had its spotlight put on it, I can 95% sure say that this is not just a down under problem. This is a problem that happens in drag scenes all over the world, and not just drag and not just the queer community, but like just humanity itself. It's bigger than us, but I think, it kind of got lumped onto all of us as, we're the problem. Which, we attribute to, and we contribute to the problem, absolutely, but it's not just us. So to be able to have that conversation and open up that sphere of dialogue was so, so important for both Kong and I. And I was really honoured to be able to have that conversation. It was really powerful. It was really special. And, Kong in talking to production as well, made sure that it was edited by the right people from those groups that could come in and edit it. So it was, dealt with really well, which I think is really, really important as well with these conversations, is that it's not led by myself. It's not led by white people. It's led by our Indigenous folk here. It is led by people of colour, and that was really, 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 really important for both of us. I'm really, really grateful that Kong, kind of held that space for me and allowed me to have the conversation with her. It's not her job, and I didn't expect her to. I would have stood there by myself and, talked about it, because it's something that I feel is really important in our communities. And as someone that has done drag for 13 years, I've seen our community shift and change, and things that, have been done or said, years ago are not acceptable in today's, world. But we're all growing and we're all learning at the same sort of pace as everybody else. And some people may have known this before I did, but I didn't know and that I was doing anything wrong, and I didn't think I was doing anything wrong or acting out of a place of trying to hurt people. But it wasn't until I was told that it was hurtful, then I was like, okay, I need to take on this this conversation, and I needed to start taking myself into learning and figuring out what I did wrong and how I can make it better and start to heal. And that has been in the form of anti-racism workshops, or talking with community leaders, donating my time, donating my money where I can, and that stuff continues beyond the show, and it was happening before the show as well. So if anything, I hope my sort of being on the show and that conversation sort of sparked conversations and action with people, in their own homes, in their own communities, and in their own worlds, because it's going to be a group effort to start making these big changes. And you start realizing that we're all in these systems, and it's not unless we all start to challenge it and push back a little bit that things start actually going in the right direction and in a positive way. But yeah, I'm really, really grateful that Kong held that space for me. I'm like, she's just an incredible human being. And it was really important for us to deal with that in the show, I think.
Yeah, it was a really touching moment. And like you said, I think it was really good the way it was handled. Kong, obviously, you can tell she's a professional. She's really caring and nurturing rather. And I thought it was dealt with really well. And I think the way you handled it, and also to hear about the ways you'd not just been talking about saying sorry, but you'd actually shown the action, which is kind of what Kong was saying, in what she was saying about, in my language, we don't have a word for sorry, because you show you're sorry, you don't say it. I thought that was really powerful, and I think it showed how mature you were, that you were willing to talk about it, and it wasn't a sort of, it was dealt with really well, I thought. One thing I wanted to touch on, which you already sort of mentioned, was about, were you expecting that your casting was going to cause a lot of sort of controversy and issues and stuff? Because it did make headlines when it was you were announced as a cast. So you were expecting that?
Yeah, I would be naive to think that my casting wouldn't sort of flare those things up. And even when they did cast me, I was like, are you sure? Like, I was very open with production about these things. I didn't want to go in being blindsiding them or anything like that. I was very, very open about it. So I was very well aware that it was going to be something that was going to come up, be it on the show or be it around the show, and who I was. I think, though, the thing for me was that, at some point, I can't, what am I trying to say? There comes a point in time that, I was sort of living in a space where I was too fearful to do things because I didn't want to offend or hurt anybody. And I knew that if I got cast on the show, if a photo of me from our show Toki Hose popped up or whatever, that it would hurt people or trigger people and stuff. And that was the thing that kind of, made me a little bit cautious about wanting to do the show. But I realized, at the same time, there's things that I can do using this platform to sort of elevate these voices and to start moving us in the correct direction, I think. And that was kind of more important for me. And, this is a dream and a goal of mine. And I was, you kind of have to have that turmoil of, do I just stop doing what I'm doing because I'm scared of what the outcome might be? Or do I, tackle this head on like I've done everything else and, face it? And hopefully it can be a learning experience for not only myself, but for others as well. Because it's a really challenging thing. You are going on to a TV show and our fan base is, very much sort of aware of these things and they go deep diving on everything and they are very vocal about it. And it petrified me, if I'm honest. But at the same time, I knew that I have a space and a place that I can utilize my voice to start pushing, positive change in our community. Because I feel that sometimes it leans into the negative space and can start getting really dark. And I don't see that being beneficial to anybody or to our community as a whole. I think we are stronger together. And if we can start working through even the darkest parts of what our community is sometimes, I think we're going to come out stronger and more united. I think when you realize how outside of the bubble of the queer community, there is still so much hate for us for just existing and for just being. And we don't need that hate being put against each other in our own spaces. That, we need to start unpacking the good, the bad, and the ugly of what we are as a community, so we stand united to face this bigger sort of feat that we have to fight together. So I think that's kind of why I did decide to go forward with the show, knowing that even, because at the end of the day as well, I'm a human being and I've made mistakes and I'm not the only one that will ever be cast on that show that is quote unquote controversial or has done something inappropriate. There has been and will be more people that have done something that is not appropriate by the standard of the time that they're in. And do we stop applying? Do we stop, if you've done one thing wrong or done something wrong, do you not apply? I don't know. It's a very big conversation. I don't have all the answers. All I know is that I went in there with my truth, with the idea that I was going to come out and try and help harvest a better community for us all.
I think that's a really mature attitude, and I think it's a big conversation. It's very difficult there's never going to be a right or a wrong answer to the whole situation. It's always going to be very multifaceted.
Yeah, and also just one other thing was that I know that for some people, they're never going to like me and they're never going to be okay with me and they're never going to forgive me. And that is absolutely 100% okay with me. And I understand that. All I can ask is that, you take me where I'm at. And, if I'm doing the wrong thing, scream at me and say, Hannah, you're doing something again. But, I do try to lead with love and kindness and respect, and I try to be the best human that I can, and make repairs to things that I've done wrong, and that's all I can say is that that's where I am. I'm constantly growing, constantly evolving, like everybody else. I just happen to be a drag queen on a show, and so I understand that, and I respect those people's decisions. But look, feel free to come up and talk to me and say hello if you're on the fence about me, because I'm a good time girl and I might surprise you.
I think it was a very mature attitude of you to have, and I think the fact that you were willing to speak about it was what was so well received by people a lot. I think because you were willing to speak about it, and it wasn't. I think in the previous season, it felt more like it wasn't quite handled in the same way because it kind of came out of nowhere and it was almost like forced upon them. And I think that's why this season it was done really well. And I think that's why, to me, there was a difference between the way the two seasons it was shown. Also, the two people are different as well. You can't compare the situations. But yeah, I really appreciated the fact that you spoke about it in such an eloquent, mature way. And then Kong was really eloquent and amazing the way she spoke about it. So I really appreciated that exchange.
Yeah, and that's what we kind of hope would come from it, is that people could see the ability to heal and to come together without it being something that is uncomfortable for everyone or erupts. And I think the only time that I've seen someone really say that it really made them uncomfortable, look, take this as you want to take it, but the only time I've been told that it was uncomfortable was from a white person. So if it made you uncomfortable, maybe there's something you need to think about there. I don't know.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's the people themselves from those communities need to talk about it, not white people. It needs to be the people themselves.
Yeah.
They are the ones that their opinion is the one that's more valid, not white people. But anyway, that's I suppose a different topic. But yeah, well, so obviously, yeah, that was a great conversation, and then you went into the challenge, really did the challenge well. The next challenge was arguably the moment I think you really sort of came into your own in the competition, I think, which was the Snatch game. What was that like doing the Snatch game? Because you obviously did Liza, which was maybe a potential risk because someone else had done it on a previous season. So what was your thinking going into it?
Wow, a Snatch game for me was one of those ones I was really excited about. I brought Liza and I brought Drew Barrymore. I'd been working on a couple of others, but they just weren't clicking with me. And Liza was the one that I'd done previously, just done spot numbers as Liza. But she was one that I had the voice in me, and she was in me. Liza was in me. So I was like, this is what I really want to do. And it was the night before the Snatch game. I just had a feeling that it was going to happen. And I was like, you know what? I feel like this could be Snatch game. And I was just in the shower, and I just started talking as Liza. And I was like, oh, we got to do Liza. And then I came up with this idea that it was like, rather than it being a new take on Liza, it's a continuation of her journey on Snatch Game. Like, she'd been there, she'd done them. Like, I was Liza in all of the Snatch Games, and you couldn't tell me otherwise on that day. I had been on the US franchise, I'd been in Canada, I'd done it. And so, yeah, I went in with this kind of multiverse of madness idea of how I was going to take Liza on, and she'd just gotten a little bit older and a little bit more kooky, and I was having the best time of my life. To be honest, I left the set. Hannah wasn't there. It was just Liza, and I was loving it. I had the best time, and it is the weirdest challenge because there's no laughter. There's no sort of, apart from Rue and the judges, it was like there's nothing else, and you kind of want to vibe a crowd, but because you couldn't, you just had to kind of get on with it and, like, you know, hope it was funny. But if Rue's laughing, you're generally in the right sort of space. But yeah, I felt like I was volleying really well back with Rue, and that's kind of the time that I felt comfortable being around Rue and seeing Rue as like just a person, and I'm just making her laugh like I'm making everyone else laugh in the workroom. And I was loving it.
It was an amazing Snatch game. It was so good. And I remember I was really cracking up. I mean, the bit where you said, like, you know, good luck with the subtitles.
Good luck with the subtitles.
So funny. And like you said, it was a continuation of all the other people who had done Snatch Game before, because it had been done at least twice on other seasons, and it was, like you said, you were getting more and more wild as you were going through. It was so funny.
Yeah, she got chaotic. It's so much fun.
And so did you think you were going to win? Because obviously, like you said, you weren't sure, because obviously you're doing it to silence, and apart from Rue laughing, you don't really get a feeling in the room of what it's like. Did you think you were going to win that week?
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting again. This episode for me is because I felt like I did really, really well. But I had also felt like I did really, really well on the other episodes, and I just didn't know anymore. Um, but at the same time, I was like, it is what it is. Like, however the cookie crumbles, I will just eat it. And I got into this space just after I took my makeup off from doing Liza, and I just wanted to leave. I'd had enough of the show, and I was just I got into a negative headspace again. And it was interesting from coming from being so high and like on this high of having such a good time to then being like, I just want to get out of here. I don't want to do this anymore. I think I was just overwhelmed. I was tired. And it was actually Queen and Spank who said, you need to snap out of it and you need to get together because you did really well and you need to just carry on. Because I was like 2 seconds away from like going to production. I'm out. I'm done. I'm done. Could you imagine leaving after that? Like not even doing the runway, just leaving. But they pulled me back and they were like, you know what? You did really good, girl. Like just do the runway and see how you feel. And thank God I did because, I was like over the moon that was one of the challenges that I won. To be honest, it was one of the ones that I went in wanting to win. But you just never know, especially taking a risk like doing a character that's been done before. Once I'd won, I relaxed a little bit more and I kind of started feeling like, okay, maybe they do understand me and they are seeing me.
It was an amazing performance, and like you said, I mean, if you had left, obviously we would have been very sad, but it also would have been kind of iconic. But just like the ultimate mic drop of just like, that's my performance, I'm going.
Goodbye.
No, but we're very glad you stayed because it was so funny. I was like, yeah, she's going to win. There was no one. Everyone, other people did well, but I thought yours was just such a standout, and Rue was just absolutely dying because I guess not only was it funny, but also Rue is a huge like Judy Garland, Liza Minnelli fan, so it was just kind of it was his thing that he was obviously going to attach to and have the most frame of reference for. So I thought, yeah, you're going to win because he was so funny.
I've lost the last bit of your question there, darling.
Oh, there was no question. I just said you were really funny.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I appreciate it. I just lost. I thought I was like, oh, what did Matt ask? But no, thank you for complimenting me. I appreciate it. But yeah, I was really, really thrilled with how Snatch Game went, and I'm glad I did like stick with it. Because I suppose also that I felt like I'd been doing well, and I know it was only episode 4, but like I'd felt like I'd been doing really well, but just kind of wasn't sort of reaping the rewards of that. And that's also a bit of a struggle because you're like, oh, well, what do I change? What do I not change? Because especially with the episode 2, when I did so well in the acting challenge and like really like I think knocked it out of the park on the runway, and then to not win, and then I'm like, well, what's the maths? I don't know the maths and the scoring system anymore. I'm confused.
Yeah, it's. I think it's kind of whatever the judges want or the producers, or like I guess it's really difficult. You're never going to know. But you did win, and it was very deserved. And then you went into the next week, and that was the girl group challenge, and you were in Babs with Kween Kong and Spanky. So basically, it was the top 3 before the top 3 happened. What did you kind of think that might be the top 3, and was that part of your sort of decision as to why you would want to work with those other 2, or what was sort of the thought process behind why you thought you 3 would be a good trio?
Yeah, so behind the scenes and traveling to and from set and whatever, I was getting really close with Queen and Spanky, and we were sort of having a really good friendship blossom. And I wanted to work with Queen since the second she walked in. And then and I also really wanted to work with Spanky, and we just had a really sort of similar sense of humor as well. So when the opportunity arose for us to pick our own groups, we were kind of like, we all just felt the same. We just like linked. It was like Queen put her arms up and we were in. And they told us, they're like, drop those arms. You can't pick until we tell you. And we're like, oh, yeah, as if. Come on, it's already done. And yeah, I suppose reflecting on the episode, I understand how that could be tricky and challenging for the other girls to feel like they've been left out. But at the same time, it was kind of like, well, this is the group we wanted. And we were all in agreement. And we got told to pick our own groups. So what can you do? And I think we worked quite harmoniously as a team. Like Queen brought in, the choreography. I brought in what I like to call the tapestry, which is the story that, goes through, because we've all done production shows and like girl group shows, I suppose you could call them. But production shows is like, a really big thing here where it's like 4 or 5 drag queens and we do like a whole narrative story. So I like to weave the tapestry. So, all the little bits and the little moments, like the hair on Queen's leg when we touch that, and the waving, that was all me. But Queen's choreography was perfect. It was wonderful. And Spanky comes in with her killer vocals and her charisma. And we just clicked. It wasn't even like we were doing Drag Race. It was like we were back home at, wherever bar we were at, preparing for our next show. It was so easy. So much fun.
Yeah, it was great, and I think you could see why you three were a top 3 and you worked really well together, and I think it was clear that your group was going to do really well and you were really sort of like close. And then the other group, I think I can see why they maybe felt a little sort of like they were the leftovers, but like you said, I guess if you're choosing your group, you all are agreeing to be in that 3. It's difficult. Someone's obviously always going to feel that way. But your performance was really good. I thought you all 3 of you brought something to the table, and you could tell each one of you had done something specific. Whether it was the choreography or the look and feel of it, and then the vocals and all that. All of it blended together really well.
Yeah, and for us, it was about Queen having her win. We wanted Queen to get on the board. And Spanky and I were like in agreement. I'd had a win, Spanky had 2, and we're like, it's Queen's turn now. So even if it was a solo win, I felt it would have been Queen's anyway. Yeah, and I suppose it's very weird in a competition setting where you're kind of trying to get the most wins, but we're like, no, it's her go for a win. But I suppose that's the down under mentality.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, but all 3 of you won that week, right?
Yes, we did. But
you didn't know that at the time, I suppose.
No, we thought it was going to be judged individually. They spring that shit on you. You never know.
And so one of the things that from that episode that was a little bit, I guess, juicy or whatever, was the other team, particularly Beverly, from the way it was shown, with she was sort of, her and Kong were having a bit of a backwards and forwards, and it seemed very sort of like she was quite a bit upset that it felt like she wasn't picked and that you 3 didn't want to be with them, and it came up a few times. Was that how it was in reality, the way it was shown on TV, or was it edited to look a different way?
When it came out, I was so angry. I was like, what the You've cut everything out again of me as a person. So I knew I wasn't winning, and I rang the therapist the next day and I was like...